Hey everyone, welcome to Quantum Mind Hub Stories. Before we dive into this story, remember to drop your thoughts, perspectives, and lessons learned in the comments section below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with friends who love a good story. Alright, grab a comfy seat, and let's get started. Lara's evening had begun like any other in the bustling suburb of Eastwood. A modest home filled with a blend of laughter and lingering tension, where dreams and financial hopes intermingled with everyday struggles. That night, as the family sat down to a simple yet lovingly prepared dinner, the unthinkable occurred. The lights abruptly went out, plunging the room into a heavy darkness that mirrored the sudden shift in their lives. Marvin, her husband, exploded in anger mid-meal, his voice echoing off the cold walls as he snapped, "You should have paid the bill." Confused and hurt, Lara could only stare as the words sliced through the silence. In that very moment, as the blackout deepened the shadows across the room, an undercurrent of betrayal surged through Lara's heart. The conversation that followed was sharp and laced with old resentments, but one word, or rather a series of them, would haunt her. "You're careless," he accused, his tone a blend of frustration and calculated blame. Unbeknownst to Lara, this was only the beginning of a long, twisting journey, a journey that would unearth hidden deceptions, test the resilience of her spirit, and force her to confront the truth buried beneath layers of denial and manipulation. In the silence that followed the dinner's abrupt end, the city outside hummed obliviously, a stark reminder that life in Eastwood moved on with or without the individual tragedies of its citizens. Yet for Lara, the darkness was no longer just the absence of light. It was the onset of despair, signaling that every cherished promise, every whispered secret between lovers was under threat of being unraveled by forces she had never imagined could tear them apart. The next morning, with the soft rays of dawn piercing through grimy windows, Lara's world shifted into an even stranger reality. In the quiet that replaced last night's emotional storm, she reached for her phone, expecting the usual update on their joint savings account. Instead, she was met with an inexplicable emptiness. The number on the screen confirmed her worst fears. Every penny they had painstakingly saved was gone. With trembling fingers, she navigated through bank statements and digital ledgers, desperately trying to convince herself that it was a simple error, a miscalculation, or a fleeting glitch. Yet as she scrutinized every detail, an unsettling clarity took hold. Meanwhile, Marvin, seemingly unaffected by the catastrophic discovery, continued to prowl around the apartment with a cold indifference. "It wasn't my fault, Lara. You must have spent too much last month," he asserted repeatedly, a rehearsed line delivered with such unwavering conviction that even her skeptical mind almost faltered. His words, meant to deflect responsibility, sparked an inner turmoil that Lara could no longer ignore. The conversation spiraled into a bitter argument fueled by sorrow, disbelief, and a creeping realization that something far more sinister was at play. Each statement Marvin made, each attempt to gaslight her, chipped away at her trust not just in him, but in the very foundation of the life they had built together. The room, once a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world, now seemed to echo with the foreboding promise of deception. In that single morning, as shadows danced beneath the dim light of a faulty bulb, Lara's understanding of reality fractured irreparably, setting her on an irreversible path toward uncovering a harrowing truth. Later that day, while Marvin busied himself with seemingly trivial distractions, Lara found herself drifting through the corridors of their modest home, a mixture of anger and despair fueling her steps. As she passed the study, a half-open door revealed a scene that sent chills down her spine, a hushed phone conversation that Marvin clearly intended to keep secret. Leaning in, she caught fragmented words that no longer belonged to a casual discussion about mundane expenses. "Yeah, I sent it. You better keep quiet." The cold delivery of his tone struck her like a bolt of lightning, crystallizing the reality that had been slowly dawning on her. In that moment, Lara's heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone in Eastwood might hear the truth. It wasn't an error, nor was it a minor oversight in their budgeting. It was a deliberate decision made by Marvin to funnel their hard-earned savings into an account meant not for them, but for his reckless brother's mounting debts. The weight of betrayal settled around her shoulders with the heaviness of 1,000 shattered dreams. Every whispered lie, every dismissive remark coalesced into a clear picture of deception. Her mind raced as she tried to grasp the full extent of his betrayal, the implications for their future, the unraveling of trust, and the deep-seated injustice of being left to shoulder the consequences. The atmosphere in the house thickened with unspoken accusations and unresolved questions. In that fraught, charged space between truth and denial, Lara realized that she was no longer merely a passive victim of circumstance. She had been thrust into the role of a detective in her own life story, determined to peel back the layers of lies that had been so carefully concealed. With her newfound awareness searing like a brand on her soul, Lara resolved to become the silent witness to every detail, every utterance that might prove the deceit lurking beneath Marvin's charming facade. Armed with only a smartphone and a fierce determination, she began a methodical campaign of documentation that would later serve as both evidence and a testament to her strength. Every subtle gesture, every murmur of conversation was recorded and stored away in an encrypted folder, and she took painstaking screenshots of bank notifications and transaction histories that slowly painted the picture of a fraud. In the dead of night, when the rest of the household surrendered to sleep, Lara would sit by the dim light of a single bedside lamp, meticulously cross-checking the numbers and correlating every anomaly with Marvin's inexplicable behavior. The act of recording each moment transformed from a mere survival tactic into a ritual of reclaiming power. "I'm not going to let him get away with this," she murmured softly to herself, the words both a vow and a balm for her wounded pride. It wasn't just the financial betrayal that stung. It was the moral unraveling of a partnership she had once believed was built on trust and mutual respect. As the days turned into a blur of covert recordings and silent confrontations with evidence, Lara's inner strength grew. She started jotting notes in a worn-out journal, details transforming into a timeline of deceit that would one day expose every hidden truth. In every recorded whisper, every calculated digital footprint, she fought not only for justice but also for her own identity, which was steadily reclaiming its rightful place in a narrative marred by lies. The hardships of a dwindling bank balance and the relentless pressure of an impending financial collapse drove the tension in the household to an almost unbearable boiling point. As the bills piled up and the hum of overdue notices filled the air, Marvin's character began to twist into something unfamiliar, a man desperate to avoid responsibility, projecting every misstep onto Lara. "You don't support me, you always mess up," he would hurl in exasperation during arguments that now turned vicious, the blame shifting relentlessly towards her. Each accusation was a small dagger that pricked at Lara's already fragile heart, yet behind that fierce reprimand lay the unmistakable signs of a man drowning in his own deceit. Despite the chaos that threatened to tear their lives apart, Lara's resolve hardened. The injustice she felt was the fuel that lit the fire of revenge burning deep within her. At the dinner table, as empty plates sat ignored and the dim light flickered in conflict with the oppressive gloom, her mind raced with possibilities. Not just of exposing Marvin, but of reclaiming every part of the future they once dreamed of together. With each passing day, even as the financial strain grew heavier, her determination to document every detail and track every number became the thread connecting past and present, carving out a roadmap to her eventual liberation. In the relentless rhythm of accusations and denials, her silent rebellion gathered strength, turning heartbreak into a catalyst for a future that promised not only justice but also a profound sense of personal restoration. In that turbulent period, the true battleground was not merely the empty bank account or the flickering lights of their home, it was the war for truth, dignity, and self-respect that she would someday win. One fateful evening, when the tension in their cramped living room reached an unsustainable crescendo, fate intervened in the form of a drunken confession that would forever alter the course of Lara's life. As the argument raged, Marvin's resolve faltered, and in a moment of careless intoxication he let slip a bitter, unguarded truth. "If it wasn't for her whining, I wouldn't have helped my brother," he muttered, his words floating in the heavy air like a death knell for their crumbling partnership. The casual admission, meant only for the blurred perception of his inebriated state, was inadvertently overheard by a friend who had stopped by to check on them. That friend, both shocked and sympathetic to Lara's plight, quickly spread the revelation among their close-knit circle. The news began to ripple through their suburban community, igniting whispers in hushed tones at neighborhood gatherings and sparking heated discussions in online community groups. For Lara, the confession was a double-edged sword. It validated the careful cataloging of her suspicions and recordings, yet it also exposed a wound that seemed impossible to mend. In that excruciating moment of vulnerability, as she stood silently in the aftermath of Marvin's unraveling facade, she realized that her secret wasn't hers to bear alone. The words echoed in her mind long after they were uttered, a reminder that the truth, once out, could no longer be re-imprisoned behind closed doors. And so, as Marvin's careless admission began to weave its way into the fabric of their lives, Lara felt both the sting of betrayal and the spark of retribution taking hold, setting the stage for a dramatic transformation in which she would emerge as both the seeker of truth and the executor of her own hard-earned justice. In the midst of the emotional chaos, a sliver of opportunity began to shine through the murk of despair. An unexpected job offer that promised a way out of the stifling dead end of her current life. Lara had always possessed a keen analytical mind and an innate understanding of numbers, a talent that had been overshadowed by the relentless emotional turmoil at home. When a financial firm in the heart of Eastwood approached her with the promise of a position as a financial analyst, it felt like the first step towards reclaiming her dignity and independence. The interview process was rigorous and demanding, but Lara's quiet determination and honed skills shone through, impressing even the most skeptical interviewers. "Your analytical precision is exactly what we need," the hiring manager had said, each word reinforcing the belief that she was destined for more than the shadows of deceit and half-truths that had marked her recent past. Accepting the position felt like a silent declaration of war against the injustice that had upended her life. It wasn't just about escaping a toxic relationship, it was about rebuilding everything from the ground up, piece by piece, with a clear purpose and a revived sense of self-worth. Every morning, as she prepared for her new role, Lara felt a burgeoning sense of hope that she could regain control of her destiny. The job was not merely a means to an end, but a powerful reminder that she was capable of more than the pain and betrayal that had dominated her recent days. With each spreadsheet she analyzed and every financial forecast she perfected, Lara was simultaneously constructing a roadmap towards liberation, a life where trust, respect, and personal achievement were not mere dreams but tangible, attainable goals. With her newfound professional foothold firmly established, Lara began to methodically plan her exit from the life that had become synonymous with betrayal and deception. Behind the veil of routine, she started discreetly laying the groundwork for a fresh start, moving step by careful step towards complete autonomy. In hushed conversations with a trusted lawyer, she inquired about the process of freezing joint accounts and the legal measures available to protect her hard-earned future from Marvin's reckless spending. Every conversation, every clandestine meeting was marked by a steely resolve, and gradually the path to liberation became clearer. Lara secured a modest new apartment on the outskirts of the city, a safe haven far removed from the suffocating memories that haunted every corner of their old home. As she signed the lease, the ink on the paper symbolized far more than a legal document. It was the first stroke in painting a future defined by self-reliance and resilience. Even as Marvin remained oblivious to the meticulous details of her exit strategy, Lara's plans were unfolding with the precision of a well-orchestrated symphony. Every call made to a bank representative, every cautious inquiry about legal rights fueled her determination. In quiet moments of introspection, Lara couldn't help but marvel at how the darkness of betrayal had ignited within her a newfound strength, a strength that would empower her to reclaim the narrative of her life and rewrite it on her own terms. Her heart, once clouded by sorrow and uncertainty, now beat with the steady cadence of anticipation for a better future where she would no longer be defined by someone else's mistakes or misdeeds. The inevitability of confrontation arrived suddenly, crashing into the fragile peace Lara had painstakingly built. Marvin, sensing the shift in power, escalated his aggression in a desperate bid to reclaim control over the narrative. During one particularly volatile argument, emotions reached a boiling point that could no longer be contained. In a fit of uncontrolled anger, Marvin's hand struck Lara, a jarring act that shattered any remaining illusion of reconciliation. The blow was not just physical but symbolic, a final, violent punctuation marking the end of an era in which Lara had long been made to feel subservient and unworthy. Standing there, stunned and trembling, she felt the weight of every recorded lie and every silent observation converge into a moment of absolute clarity. "You'll hear from my lawyer," Marvin snarled, his voice cracking as if trying to mask the vulnerability that had led him to this point. But in that moment, Lara's resolve burned brighter than ever. The slap was not an endpoint. It was the catalyst that propelled her forward with renewed determination to reclaim every ounce of her dignity. With her mind already teeming with the evidence and proof of Marvin's deceptions, she understood that this act of violence would not define her fate. Instead, it would serve as a turning point, a clear demarcation between the past that had stolen her joy and the future that promised freedom and empowerment. The charged silence that followed was filled with an almost tangible mix of sorrow and righteous fury, as Lara silently vowed that she would not only escape this toxic relationship, but also ensure that justice would eventually have its day. In the days that followed the violent confrontation, the walls of their home bore silent witness to Lara's quiet metamorphosis. Each room, once a stage for whispered lies and shattered dreams, became the backdrop against which she would reclaim the narrative of her own life. Packing only the essentials, she left behind fragments of a shared existence that had devolved into a labyrinth of deceit, focusing instead on the glimmer of hope that lay ahead. Outside, the suburban streets of Eastwood buzzed with mundane activity, a striking contrast to the tumult that had consumed her world just moments before. As she stepped out into the cool morning air, every step was imbued with a mix of sorrow, resolve, and the beginning of liberation. Friends and neighbors, once sympathetic but powerless, began to see the courage in her silent rebellion as whispers of Marvin's indiscretions spread like wildfire. With the evidence securely stored on encrypted devices and the legal wheels already in motion, Lara felt an exhilarating mixture of vulnerability and strength. She sought solace in the small victories, a kind word from a stranger at the local coffee shop, the supportive nod from a colleague at her new job. And each became a building block in the structure of her new, self-determined identity. The pain, raw and unyielding, was gradually tempered by a burgeoning sense of hope and empowerment, prompting her to view every setback as a prelude to a triumphant comeback. Step by step, she was not only leaving behind a life marred by betrayal but also constructing the foundations of a future where she was the sole architect of her destiny. As Lara embarked on the arduous journey of rebuilding her life, the meticulous records of Marvin's treachery became the very weapons she wielded in her quest for justice. Late evenings found her reviewing hours of recorded conversations and hundreds of screenshots that captured the unraveling of a man who had once promised unwavering protection. With each new piece of evidence, her confidence solidified, and the labyrinth of deceit that Marvin had carefully constructed began to crumble under the relentless scrutiny of cold, hard facts. The documentation, painstakingly compiled over weeks, was more than digital proof. It was an anthology of betrayal that transformed the narrative from one of personal failure into a clarion call for accountability. This data not only affirmed the existence of the financial sabotage, but also painted a damning portrait of a man who manipulated trust for his selfish ends. In the quiet sanctuary of her rented apartment, Lara reviewed every file, every recorded whisper, allowing each revelation to fuel the fire of her determination. The evidence was irrefutable, and the thought of one day presenting it to an attorney to reclaim what was rightfully hers and to expose Marvin's double-faced nature became a beacon in the dark. Each recorded moment, each painstakingly saved transaction was a step toward a future where justice was not only done but seen to be done. The nights grew longer as she became both archivist and judge of her own painful memories, transforming the currency of deception into the coin of liberation ready to be spent in the marketplace of retribution. In time, the carefully amassed body of evidence paved the way for an undeniable exposure that sent shockwaves throughout the tight-knit community of Eastwood. Through discreet channels, Lara managed to share critical snippets of her records with a trusted circle whose collective shock soon morphed into a demand for accountability. As word of Marvin's deceit spread, the initial murmurs of disbelief evolved into impassioned discussions on local radio shows, neighborhood Facebook groups, and even community town hall meetings. The once hidden layers of corruption and betrayal began to surface like rust on metal. Ding, the facade Marvin had so meticulously maintained for years. Conversations that were meant to be private turned into viral stories that resonated with many who had experienced their own betrayals, each shared testimony adding fuel to a growing firestorm of collective outrage. "I never thought it would come to this," one neighbor admitted in a hushed conversation, her voice tinged with both sorrow and vindication. The exposure not only disrupted Marvin's carefully crafted lies but also challenged the cultural norms that often forced silent acceptance of financial and emotional abuse within families. For Lara, every hostile headline and every impassioned comment in local forums underscored a deeper truth. That truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to shine through. Empowered by the roar of a community demanding justice, she took the next step toward formally confronting the institutions that had allowed such manipulation to persist. In a blaze of courage, Lara prepared to bring her case to court, armed not just with digital evidence, but with the moral authority of countless voices whose lives had been touched by similar betrayals. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Marvin's world began to unravel in the public eye. Once seen as the steadfast provider, his reputation now lay in tatters, exposed by the mounting evidence of his reckless decisions. The courtroom became the stage where Lara's quiet determination transformed into a formidable force, her detailed records serving as the unassailable testimony that left little room for doubt. Witness after witness recounted intimate details of Marvin's erratic behavior, the gaslighting, the deliberate manipulation, and the facade of loyalty that had crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. Legal experts in the courtroom remarked on the meticulous nature of her documentation, noting that each entry painted a vivid picture of betrayal and the injustice of a man who had squandered not only their savings but also the trust of those who had once believed in his integrity. For the judges and jurors alike, the evidence was both a mirror and a message reflecting the painful realities of financial exploitation and emotional abuse that often went unchallenged. In this public arena, the scales of justice began to tip in favor of accountability. Marvin, unable to counter the overwhelming truth with any plausible excuse, was left to face not only legal repercussions but also the scorn of a community that had once embraced him. The courtroom drama served as a powerful reminder that every act of deceit carries with it the potential for devastating consequences, a lesson that reverberated far beyond the confines of that sterile space. In the end, the verdict was more than a legal pronouncement. It was the long-awaited vindication of a woman who had transformed heartbreak into her greatest weapon against injustice. In the aftermath of the legal battle, as Marvin's downfall became the subject of hushed conversation and public disdain, Lara emerged not as a victim, but as a beacon of resilience and empowerment. The scars of her ordeal, though deep and painful, had carved within her an indomitable strength, a strength that she now channeled into transforming her personal tragedy into a force for positive change. Embracing her new role as a financial literacy advocate, Lara began hosting community workshops where she shared her story, not to dwell on the past, but to equip others with the knowledge and tools to safeguard their finances and personal well-being. In these intimate gatherings, held in community centers and local cafes, she spoke with raw authenticity about the red flags of manipulation, the importance of transparency in relationships, and the need for unwavering vigilance in the modern financial landscape. "Document everything," she would say, her voice firm yet gentle, conveying the hard-won lesson that silence, in the face of injustice, only serves as an accomplice to deceit. Her message resonated powerfully with audiences from all walks of life, many of whom had silently endured similar betrayals. The transformation was palpable. A once-muted figure of despair had now become a catalyst for change, her painful past repurposed into a rallying cry for accountability and self-empowerment. Community members began to see her not as a cautionary tale, but as an exemplar of how one can rise from the ashes of betrayal to rebuild a life of purpose, dignity, and hope. In every workshop and every public speaking engagement, Lara reminded her listeners that while the road to recovery might be fraught with obstacles, the journey toward reclaiming one's power was both possible and profoundly transformative. A full year after the lights first went out on that fateful dinner, the final act of this turbulent saga arrived with both the sting of revenge and the warmth of renewal. Marvin's life had spiraled into a chaotic ruin, broke, evicted, and isolated, while Lara's transformation had become the stuff of local legend. Having rebuilt her world on a foundation of truth and newfound strength, she now thrived in every aspect of her life. From her role as a respected financial analyst to her impassioned advocacy for financial literacy, Lara's story served as an inspirational tale of personal comeback and unyielding courage. Standing before a captivated audience at a community hall in Eastwood, she recounted her journey with a raw honesty that resonated deeply with every listener. "Document everything," she urged, her voice echoing with the wisdom of experience and the certainty of justice served. "Silence is power." As her words filled the room, the crowd erupted in applause, a collective celebration of a woman who had turned her greatest betrayal into a powerful weapon against injustice. In that electrifying moment of vindication, Lara's message was clear. When faced with deception and cruelty, one must rise, fight, and transform pain into strength. And now, as you watch her story unfold, let it inspire your own journey. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends, and comment your perspectives or key lessons learned, because every story of resilience is a spark of hope in a world that desperately needs it. Silent Heart has a voice that can change the world.